Let's explore whether or not Buddhas are antisocial. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. I'm going to paraphrase the title of the question as a writing exercise for myself. Can one who has attained nirvana still function in society? Would they now? I think this is pretty much the actual verbiage. Would they still pay rent, get their taxes done, go to work and make money, be a parent and raise a kid? Me and my mom are learning about Buddhism and have this question. Pardon me? So we're going to begin with broad brushstrokes before we get to fine details. So let's just start from the beginning. What's a Buddha? Is a Buddha an entity who only experiences peace and love and nothing else? Is a Buddha an entity who only sits and speaks in riddles and nothing more than that? What if a Buddha is simply a bloke what practices the Eightfold Path so well that they've mastered it? What is the Eightfold Path? The Eightfold Path can be befuddling to entities such as you and I, who only have 4 fingers and 1 thumb on each hand. Luckily, smarter folks than me, and possibly you, have figured out how to group it down into just a set of 3 groups. The first would be view, the second would be action, the third would be meditation. So let's break it on down. The right view is simply this. Someone has a liberating view of reality. It's a view of reality that supports letting go. And that can be as simple. Well, actually, I'm going to reverse sequence this. So let's do it this way. Let's begin with meditation as described by the 7 enlightenment factors. It begins with, I like to begin with number 7 because I'm worded that way, but liberating mindfulness means that instead of fighting our brain, instead of relying upon our prefrontal cortex, specifically our medial prefrontal cortex, to actively concentrate, which is going to make us cranky and exhausted. Instead of doing that, we rely upon a different part of our central nervous system. We rely upon our sympathetic nervous system during each inhalation to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. 8th, liberating meditation is simply, instead of relying upon our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to actively contemplate, which once again is exhausting and can make us cranky and nutty and anxious. Instead of that, we rely upon the parasympathetic nervous system during each exhalation to physically relax and mentally release. So here is something wild. When we do this, it opens up a spiritual can of whoop-ass. You see, and this is wild. Every time we notice, every time we breathe in, whether we want to or not, whether we mean to or not, we can't help but notice. We notice sights and sounds and sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, and we notice that they change, sometimes very subtly and glacially, other times suddenly and jarringly. And this gives us the liberating view of reality, liberating view of impermanence. Let me know if you've heard this one before. Ever-changing, when in all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Changing makes of grasping an absurdity. But wait, there's more. Every time we inhale, whether we want to or not, we can't help but notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings that are always changing. Every time we inhale, whether we want to or not, we cannot help but notice the external, the internal, the physical, the mental, the pleasurable, the painful, the interesting, the boring, the glorious, and the grotesque. And these things are always changing as well. Seasons change, the moon waxes and wanes, the sun rises and sets, our chest swells and sinks. Everything is in constant flux. This requires absolutely zero faith, absolutely no ability to philosophize. Every time we breathe in, we cannot help but notice these things. 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness. That's folds 2 through 5 for those playing along during the home version of the game. Now here's something weird. I'm going to start with let's return to our friend mindfulness and meditation. By the way, mindfulness and meditation are the dynamo that drive the entire path to enlightenment. And no, you don't have to spend your whole day meditating. You can start off meditating for 5 minutes once every 12 hours or so. Gently, gradually, over a period of, 15, 16 weeks, you can build up to be able to meditate, 5 minutes longer every week. Gently, gradually, doably. But this whole mindfulness and meditation thing, let's forget them for a second. And let's look at love and letting go through the paradigm of bad news and good news. First, bad news. When we rely upon our medial prefrontal cortex to actively concentrate, and when we rely upon our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to actively contemplate, for some strange reason, our blood gathers at the bottom of our limbic system in a region known as the amygdala that seems to function as the seat of both anxiety and aggression. Dude, we didn't start meditating so that we could become as nervous as Deputy Barney Fife or as aggressive as the Tasmanian devil in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. But that's what happens so often because of bad teachers. Some are malicious, most are just lazy-minded. Lazy-minded minions of patriarchy, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But here's the good news. When we swap out our strategies, when we swap out active concentration for the passive mindfulness that relies upon our sympathetic nervous system, when we swap out active contemplation for the passive meditation that relies upon our parasympathetic nervous system, then whether we want to or not, our blood mass shifts away from our cranky amygdala and towards our anterior cingulate gyrus, a hunk of meat that kind of looks like a baseball glove. Baseball mitt, is that it? A catcher's mitt that is just a couple centimeters behind our forehead. This functions as the seat of empathy and compassion and love. And this is why the greatest Dzogchen Lamas of Tibet have insisted that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. So we talked about how everything in the Eightfold Path is driven from mindfulness and meditation. We've talked about a right view of impermanence that helps us to let go, And we've talked, well, let's talk a little bit more about love and letting go. Now, good old Albert Einstein once quipped, or at least the tale is told that he once quipped, that any educated idiot can make things, I feel like Buzz Lightyear when I says, can make things more complicated and difficult and violent. But it takes a lot of courage and a little bit of genius to move in the opposite direction. So any fool can make the Buddha's path more complicated. They can add rules, hundreds and hundreds of rules, but the Buddha made the path super simple. And I would love to tell you that I'm so brilliant, I figured this out myself, but I'm not. The great late Karma Jigme of India taught that the essence of physical morality was nonviolence or kind conduct. The essence of the Bodhisattva vows was simply wishing others well. That the essence of interpersonal morality is kind communication. That the essence of circumstantial morality is simply kind commerce. Now, I want to unpack this because living as I do in America, it simply means choosing to practice kind commerce means three things. Number one, let's not be a proverbial Karen and just busy ourselves with the task of trying to get people fired. Number two, let's not be a Chad and stomp and snort and trying to drive other businesses out of business and make people employed. That's just mean-spirited. Number three, let us forsake being cruel and competitive and instead be kind and cooperative. Well, we've covered, there's just one more thing left. The sixth fold of the eightfold path. So this is kind of wild. But here's how it works. Remember how I said a few moments ago that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived, and it is the natural forward-falling motion, the natural consequence of training in mindfulness and meditation. Consider, if you will, this copulating couple a constant of Buddhist iconography. Consider, if you will, this gal who appears to be the color of a cumulus cloud. Notice how actively she sports in tantric union. This reminds us that contrivance will always be trumped by spontaneity. Now consider her partner, the color of the azure sky, who appears to be passively savoring the same tantric union. This reminds us that not all spontaneity is created equal, and that the let's try this again. And that the scattered spontaneity we could sample simply by consuming 3 shots of espresso over the span of 30 minutes. That scattered spontaneity will always be trumped by the centered spontaneity that is generated by mindfulness and meditation. So much so that when our choices, utterances, and deeds flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, our life could be as blissful as a real or imagined Buddha's paradise or pure land, or if you prefer Sanskrit, Vati. So that's the Eightfold Path in a nutshell. And did you know, according to the Buddha, you could, if you're used to sitting, if you're raised in a culture where sitting is a common thing, you could master it in 7 days. And if you're like me, who was raised in a culture where people just kind of hang out on the couch, then you can do it in like 15 or 16 weeks. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You can do this without having to shave your hair and wear weird clothes. You don't have to leave your job or leave your partner or leave your pets. You can continue to work your job and just gently and incrementally progress upon the path. Over the span of, let's see, 3, 4 goes into, in less than 4 months. So I've mentioned that what if enlightenment was nothing more than the mastery of the Eightfold Path? That, of course, invites the question, what is mastery? You're probably smarter than me, but as a child, I was befuddled by the specter of tying my own shoes. Great tears were shed in the process. However, after much time and effort and repeated instructions, by the time I entered first grade, I got so good at tying my shoes that I could do it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. Whenever we master anything, that's how it is, including the Eightfold Path. Why is there so much confusion? About 100 years before the advent of the Buddha, good old Lao Tzu in China composed the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. If one was to read them every week for a year or two, you would notice patterns. You would notice not only does the Tao Te Ching enumerate the various symptoms of yin and yang, but also the advantages and disadvantages. And contrary to the ravings of stupid white people, the author's intent was not for us to reconcile yin and yang. No, it was something different, to recognize yin and yang and to always choose yin. But what has that to do with Buddhism? Well, essentially a lot, because it's not unique to China. Yin and yang are universal archetypes, so much so that they also evolved in Buddhism. Only in Buddhism, instead of talking about yang and patriarchy, they just talked about the Buddha's wicked cousin, Devadatta. Why do they call him Devadatta? Because it was considered rude and impolite and rather vulgar to refer to him as Captain Shithead. But Captain Shithead thought it'd be a wonderful idea to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. Whoopsie, look at that. But on the other hand, you have yin, or matriarchy, or Gautama, the Buddha, who thought it'd be a marvelous idea instead to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. So when we view the Buddha's path from a place of being rigid and fearful and superstitious and controlling and elitist and cryptic and literal-minded, we can come up with all sorts of bizarro beliefs. And just as it never ends well for the chickens to be guarded by the fox, similarly, minions of patriarchy, people who are defined by being rigid, fearful, suspicious, controlling, elitist, competitive, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, are like moths. They are drawn to the flame of positions of authority and power and prestige and wealth. They cannot help themselves. They are drawn to it spontaneously. And so these are the people, and we see also in the life story of Devadatta that he put all his genius into conniving and weaseling his way into positions of power. And once he accomplished that, his teachings were worthless. He didn't help people, he harmed people, and all his followers went back to the Buddha. All his followers that he stole from the Buddha returned to the Buddha. So we see this a lot, that people become minions of orthodoxy. They become super cranky, super controlling, and they don't help people. They do more harm than good. People who are elitist love lording it over others. I'm special and you're not. If you're an OG like myself, you may remember the first season of Saturday Night Live. I think they called it Live on Saturday Night. And Chevy Chase would host the news, and he'd say, "Good evening, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not." And of course, in junior high, we thought that was the height of wit. But but there's so many people saying, they just keep moving the goalposts and moving the goalposts until enlightenment becomes this bizarre, unattainable thing. But the Buddha never meant it as an unattainable thing. The Buddha meant it as something that you can accomplish between 1 and 16 weeks, depending upon your physical conditioning. That's pretty amazing, if you ask me. 1 and 16 weeks at committing to just practice once every 12 hours or so does not seem insurmountable and impossible. The first of 7 enlightenment factors is mindfulness. Therefore, if anyone tells you that if you're enlightened, you will no longer perceive the full spectrum of human emotions, they are mistaken. Anything that undermines our mindfulness is not going to make us enlightened. Remember, mindfulness is all about being vulnerable, passive, visceral, and random. So if we're being rigid and controlling, ain't that cute, but it's wrong. So I've already answered this question for you. And so there's nothing left now but to put it into action and to actually do it. Nothing to it but to do it. So, yeah, and forgive me for being silly. I know that's a lame thing to say. So, here's what I'd like to do right now. I'd like to swan dive into the fine details with you. I would love to chant and meditate with you together as a team after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible through the generosity of viewers just like you. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to play with a different text, so please bear with me while I open that bad boy up. And now, quick like a bunny, through the magic of OBS, I will share the text with you. Dun dun dun. All right, who is this all-good individual? Glad you asked. Described in Sanskrit as Samantabhadra, Samantabhadri, Karmamundra. Described in Tibetan as Kuntu Zangpo, Kuntu Zangmo, Yabyum. Described in English as the all-good one's tantric union, or sporting and tantric union. If we have the misfortune of traversing the path of being rigid and fearful and controlling, we might view them as real or as celestial entities to be worshipped and supplicated. However, if you have the very good fortune to hang out with me, hello, if you have the very good fortune to traverse the path of being flexible and loving and laid back, then you will simply view all good as an archetype, whose iconography reminds us that we are already wired to master, no less practice, awareness and letting go, bliss and letting go, as well as love and letting go. Excuse me. Excuse me and my mucus. So what I'm going to do right now, let's review the mantra's meaning, shall we? I'm going to change this art because it hurts my back. I'm kind of a big wussy boy that way. I'm super sensitive to energy. Some people think it's because it's spiritual. I just think it's a pain in the tuchus, but not in the fun, tingly way. So, quick like a bunny, I'm going over here and I'm going to click on Konto Songpo and I'm going to click on Mantra. Okay, so we're just like cooking pancakes. This is a very fuzzy, that'll do. Just like cooking pancakes, we are going to flip and flop between mantra meditation and silent meditation. So I think it makes perfect sense in my fuzzy little, furry little brain to begin by reminding you of the meaning of the mantra. Please chant with me. I invoke teachers, home action, all meditation, whom view that the Benza Tantra Guru teachers Pema enlightenment and siddhi abilities, whom may be mastered by all. So, un momento, if you please. I'm going to once again, through the magic of word, change everything. So I'm going to hit this, and I'm going over here, and I'm going to click 48. Here we go. Om. Hu. Ben, Za. And in the words of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, excellent. So, I'm going to give you something for nothing. Let us explore the metaphoric philosopher's stone that transforms the worthless lead of mindless mantra recitation into the spiritually protective gold of mantra meditation. It's super simple, and it comes in two parts. Part 1. During our inhalation, we silently, mentally, and passively recite this italicized bit, relaxing into this. But what is this? This is whatever we notice, and you know what? Let me just sing real quick, and hit this bad boy, copy, and go over here, and hit paste. And let's go over here and hit this bad boy, hit copy, and paste. Okay, fabulous. Okay, so relaxing into this, but what is this? This is whatever we notice as we breathe in, thanks to the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the thoracic region of our spinal cord. And this is whatever we notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. This is whatever sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, or the like we notice. This is whatever emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, or imaginings we notice. This is whatever we notice, whether it is external or internal, physical or mental, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring, glorious or grotesque. Well, what do we do with all the stuff that we notice? Simple. During our exhalation, we physically relax as best we can while striving to chant this 12-syllable mantra 4 times per breath, thus relying upon our parasympathetic nervous system, which is ensconced within both our lower lumbar region as well as the brainstem, that some describe as the tippy top of our cervical region. Tomato. So I'm going to practice this with you right now, and I'm going to do it while illustrating how to count 4 recitations of the mantra in a manner that is hopefully meaningful. I'm going to count on my left hand. I'm going to advance my thumb upon these sets of creases and then the tip of my left little finger. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. What do I do with the remaining 12 creases and tips of the remaining fingers? Glad you asked. I now shift gears to the silent version of this. During our inhalation, I invite you to silently and mentally recite "Notice this," thus encouraging our Steve Urkel of a brain to cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system, allowing us to perceive. And during our exhalation, I invite you to silently and mentally recite the 1-syllable verb ease, also causing our Steve Urkel of a brain, did I do that? Our Steve Urkel of a brain to cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system that we might physically relax and mentally release. I like to advance the thumb during the inhalation. There you have it, my friend. This is the essence of the Buddha's path. Everything else is a really fun elaboration to deepen our appreciation and enjoyment and fun of this process. But, gun to your head, if this you only practice the essence of enlightenment, that would be this. How cool is that? So, during the opening, I threatened you with bliss and letting go. So let's tiptoe into our first foray in that area. Please chant with me. Let us invite real or imagined Guru Samanta Bhadra to the crown of all head. That in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. So this drawing of a teacher and his partner doing the hibbity-dibbity reminds us of the dynamism of our own enlightened potential. This is important. Life is dynamic. There is constant change. And there is, we feel the full spectrum of emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, imaginings, and perceptions. There is never a dull moment. And that's part of the path, despite what the poop heads might tell you. So during the inhalation, let us silently and mentally recite Lama come. During the exhalation, to this crown. So this is not an actual supplication. This is a metaphor. A metaphoric supplication. And as you'll probably notice over here, in this image here, even though occasionally I might lift my hands in front of the camera, most of the time I'm just resting my palms in my lap. That's most sustainable. That's what I recommend. But I'm going to demonstrate one more time. I then repeat that for the mantra. Well, that is just embarrassing. Okay, let's go over here. Un, deux, trois. And hit copy. And hit paste. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 And now for the remaining 3 fingers, gonna rest. Having climbed to contemplative cruising altitude together as a team, let us meditate. As transformatively as generally Argana on Ajahn Claus. Oopsie. Yes, on Ajahn Claus, under the guidance of Luke Skywalker. Let us now practice the outer set of preliminary practices from a certain point of view. Together. Let us courageously exercise the vulnerability to notice all the stress, that the seeds of empathy we may sow. Oh, that's the wrong button. Let's try that again. Wrong lever. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hum. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Be Maziri Hum. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Be Maziri Hum. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Be Maziri Hum. Allow me to remind you that a fringe benefit of inhaling is not only that we live, but that our body spontaneously generates a vertical traction between our tush and our head. Instead of torturing ourselves with the fear of karma, may we view interdependence as the opportunity for our love to lighten the loads of others. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 rather than torment ourselves with the dread of death. May we recall that. Ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Instead of neurotically straining to make the most of each precious meditation opportunity, we could simply flow from mindfulness and meditations, generation of loving centered spontaneity. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Well, that's weird, isn't it? Let us practice the inner set of preliminary practices adapted from the final teachings of Dzogchen Rinpoche's Heart Treasure of the Enlightened Ones. In our compassion, may we long to free all beings from the toxic tyranny of hate, engraving, and cleaning meat, metaphorically known as the three mental poisons. Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om. Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om. Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om. Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. In our pragmatism, may your liberation of all others be fueled by your reliance on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students, described by the metaphor of the three wish-fulfilling jewels. Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. Rather than squander all time and energy in defensiveness, how much wiser could it be to learn all mistakes lessons that effortlessly flow from mindfulness and meditation-centered spontaneity? Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Ahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. A life squandered in competition and greed leads not to peace and fulfillment. Better to live in cooperation and generosity. At last, and may this mind shoot out crowns on purifying, transforming, increasing, and giving my stuff to all beings of nirvana and samsara. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Let us bring Guru Yoga, also known as Lama Naljor, into Energy Work's path of bliss and letting go. Let us invite real or imagine Lama Kuntu Zangpo to our heart mind. Oh, okay. Let us invite real or imagine Lama Kuntu Zangpo to blend with our heart mind, that in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Let us view letting go through a philosophical lens, as we bring the illusion of the horizontal duality of us and them into the dance of impermanence and interdependence, known as Madhyamaka's yoga of inconceivability. All circumstances or laws could be yes and permanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. All bodies or forms could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communication or speech. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. All interpersonal speech could be yes and permanent and interdependent. As if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this mind. Let's hit insert. All interpersonal speech could be yes and permanent and interdependent, as if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this mind. Om Mahum Benzu Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 All minds could be yes and permanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into our vast empty void. Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although tantalizing to the eye could be not graspable to the hand. Om Mahum Benzu Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Let us bring the experience of the four bases of mindfulness into the conventional path of love and letting go, where it is love that is emphasized and it is jealousy that is left over. Rather than indulge or controlling tendencies with the bodies of visualization, emotion, magic, and belief, we could just recite these words of love in harmony with our breathing and allow our subconscious to do the heavy lifting. One moment, if you please. I must tend to something before I forget. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4. And paste. And thank you for your patience. May all minds of all beings know we as peacefully wise as the mind of a real Lord. Imagine Buddha symbolized by articulate one syllable seed or bija mantra. So we're going to take all these words and condense them down to just 6 syllables. During our inhalation, we're going to silently and mentally recite the top line, and during the exhalation, we're going to silently and mentally recite the bottom line, remembering that this is simply nothing to believe or nothing to wish for. It's just simply words that we play with to exercise the neural pathways responsible for loving intention. So I want to be honest with you. It's a real struggle with me to bear witness to the various genocides running concurrently on this planet. The ones in Palestine and Ukraine and Jordan and the Congo. And when I hear about leaders who really are just selfish and stupid and cruel, I can feel very much like Dr. Bruce Banner transforming into the Hulk. And so what I'll do is I'll silently and mentally recite this. And so I take all that energy and just transform it into a loving intention. Because let's face it, if our leaders' cleverness transformed into wisdom, we would have a different world, would we not? Of course, that's not all I do. I also, talk to people and sign petitions and try to vote my way into a better future for those who come after us. Oops, that was a mistake, wasn't it? Let's see if I can't fix that. Oh, wow. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what is the philosopher's stone that turns the metaphoric lead of mindless mantra recitation into the spiritually protective gold of mantra meditation? And the answer is twofold. During the inhalation, we silently and mentally and passively recite this italicized bit. During our exhalation, we physically relax as best we can while striving to chant these 12 syllables 4 times per breath, if we can. And if not, please remember to give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om Mahung Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung. 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 So now we're going to rest the mind in mindfulness and meditation while silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this during each inhalation and the one-syllable verb ease during each exhalation. And I prefer to advance the left thumb during the inhalation. Most of the time, I don't stick my hand in front of the camera. I just rest it in my lap, for that is most ergonomically sound. May all relationships, all speech of all beings now be as joyfully loving as a real or imagined Buddhist communication symbolized by the 12 syllable mantra. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung. 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 May all bodies or forms of all beings now enjoy the beautiful health seen in Buddhist statuary, depicting the blissful body of a real or imagined Devi or Yadama, an archetype of enlightenment such as Kuntu Zangpo. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung. 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 May all circumstances or lots of all beings now have the good fortune or boon. As a Buddha's real or imagined paradise, pure land or Vati. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Let's seal this morning's practice by percussively chanting, loving letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds of all beings lucid yet void no be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by a one-syllable bija. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void no be as loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by a multi-syllable mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet void no be as healthy as a Dhammak type depicted in Buddhist statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing yet void no be as fortunate as a pure land of law depicted in Buddhist paintings. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 9.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.